Welcome back to the Fantasy Reserve. My name is Vitrano, and I'm joined here by my co-host.
I'm Matt once again.
And we are going to be talking about the Week 5 schedule for this upcoming week of fantasy football. Obviously, a lot has happened in Week 4, a lot of injuries, so there's a lot of things to talk about, Matt. Um, so that being said, we should go ahead and start with our waiver wire picks first. And I'll go ahead and start off with my number one waiver wire pick of the week. It's going to be Dontavian Wicks. Now, Matt, Dontavian Wicks is only rostered in 20% of rosters on Sleeper. I saw that. He had the tied for the fifth most targets in week 4. Christian Watson just got hurt, and I have some stats here that kind of, justify his adding. He led the team in targets with 13. That's a 24% target share. He achieved he has achieved in his career higher than 20 fantasy points per game in every game. He's run over 70% of routes. He ran 81% routes in week 4. He had 58 snaps for 45 routes run, only one less snap than Reed, the same amount of routes run, and 5 more targets. He also had a team high 35% air yard share with 200, and this was even including some of the drops that he had, but Love just he kept trusting him to throw him the ball, and it worked out for him. What do you think?
Yeah, I think if you need a wide receiver this week, he's probably the one to go for. I don't think he's going to take Jaden Reed's job or anything. I think Jaden Reed is probably the most slept on wide receiver this season. I think Jordan Love might be the most slept on QB this season. But Wicks definitely was performing pretty well, and I don't really see another wide receiver that you'd want to get over him. Um, Maybe the guy on the Raiders, but then again, Jacoby Myers is probably the next up if Adams leaves. So I'd say he's probably the best wide receiver on the waiver wires right now.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. Now, I know that you have a waiver wire target as well. Why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I'm thinking Kareem Hunt is probably, in my opinion, the best waiver wire of the week because we saw that Carson Steele on the Chiefs, he's had a couple fumbles. I think you have a few fumbles in the NFL and you're kind of like not trusted anymore. So Kareem Hunt is like pretty much the next up in that backfield. Pacheco is going to be out for at least 6 to 8 weeks, probably longer even because he got, full surgery. So Kareem Hunt's going to be the go-to running back. Rashee Rice just had a injury. I don't know if they've released it yet, but it's probably not a great injury if they're refusing to give a bunch of information about it. But you're down a receiver, you're down RBs. Like Kareem Hunt's just gonna run the ball like more than usual because they're not gonna throw it as much. So I think Kareem Hunt's probably the best waiver wire pickup, and I would endorse using a very good amount of fab on it. I would consider like 40% or more of your fab if you it's more if you need a running back because this might be a RB1 in Kareem Hunt.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely agree. I saw some stats here from when Hunt was playing. He is only rostered in about 40% of leagues currently on Sleeper. And he had 17 opportunities for 85 total yards last week. Once Carson Steele fumbled, like you said, in the first quarter, he never came back. He got pretty much put in the doghouse. I think Andy Reid is pretty notorious for doing that. He gives his guys the opportunity, and once they squander it, he goes with the next guy up. And that's exactly what happened. Hunt never let go of those opportunities, had almost 5 yards per carry and 8 yards per reception. He's definitely a guy that I'm looking to add this week if he is available in your leagues. I'm all for it.
Yeah, I also saw a thing that apparently he was coming off of an injury last season and now he's injury free, so people think he's going to play even better. But I think he's the most important waiver wire pickup this week, and he might be in my opinion, the best waiver wire pickup of the season so far because you're going to get a guaranteed RB1 out of the Chiefs.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. Um, for our last waiver wire pickup, I'm going to talk about a guy that I've been talking about for the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, and that's Wandale Robinson. Um, 47% rostered in sleeper leagues. He was tied for the third most targets in week 4. He had 14 targets. He caught 11 of those in week 4. He's been averaging 13.2 fantasy points per game. He's had 8 targets in at least 3 of 4 games, 11 points in at least 3 of 4 games, and he currently has the 5th most targets in the NFL. This is a guy that's very slept on, in my opinion. I know that the Giants' running game is not efficient. It's not very good, and Daniel Jones seems to be slinging the rock as many times as he can. And to have Wan'Dale Robinson have almost as many targets as Malik Neighbors is absolutely insane for a wide receiver too. The value is there. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I agree. I think if you have Wandale available in your league, you need to go get him. Honestly, I'd probably say get him over Wicks, in my opinion. I think he's looking really good, and yeah, I think the stats back it up. So if Wandale is available in your league, I would really try to get him this week.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I actually went and got him in one of my dynasty leagues, traded him, ended up getting Wan'Dale Robinson and AJ Brown for a decently sized trade package. So not too shabby on my end. Really happy with it. But those are our waiver wire pickups. Let's get right into the games this week, Matt. Why don't you tell us about the first one?
Let's see. The first game is going to be the Buccaneers and the Falcons. So I think these two teams, like I was saying last week, they're kind of coin flip teams. Like they're either going to play amazing or they're just going to shit the bed completely. The Buccaneers, they have shit the bed once, but the other three times they played just absolutely insane. Um, in terms of the Falcons, Kirk Cousins, he's not really showing us anything yet. He's like a 12 point, QB every week. Bijan, he's really good, but he's honestly not getting anything done like crazily. Like last year, he had like some crazy runs. This year, I haven't really seen anything like that out of him. Just a couple yards, and then they get closer to the down or whatever. Drake London's been pretty quiet, but on the Buccaneers side, Baker's dropping like almost 30-point games. You got Godwin kind of tearing it up. You got Mike Evans. He's just a touchdown machine. Um, so I'm gonna go with start your studs on this, like start Bijan, um, start Mike Evans, start Godwin, I'd say start Baker for sure. If you have Baker and you don't have anybody better, like a top tier QB.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely agree with you. There's some interesting notes that I saw while doing my research from this last week. The wide receivers in Atlanta compare way too much. Darnell Mooney had 54 snaps compared to Drake London's 55 total snaps. Ray McLeod had the same amount of snaps as Drake London. Uh, Darnell Mooney ran 32 routes compared to Drake London's 34, and Ray McLeod ran 30 compared to Drake London's 34. Now, where they differentiate is London had 12 targets last week compared to 5 from Mooney and 6 from Ray McLeod. But to have all of them so close in the amount of snaps that they're taking, the routes that they're running, and Mooney and McLeod having similar target share, it's kind of insane to me. Uh, Obviously, you're going to start Drake London; he's emerging as the favorite target, but it's interesting to see. A lot of people are really high on Mooney, but I wouldn't hold my horses, you know, just yet. Ray McLeod is kinda emerging potentially as a wide receiver too there for some reason. Outside of that, Kyle Pitts, for some reason, I saw a stat on Twitter, Matt, and you can tell me what you think about this. Kyle Pitts on all 3 of his targets this week lined up on the outside, facing cornerbacks instead of on the inside versus linebackers like a tight end normally does. It was something that I was genuinely shocked by because I didn't really know or understand why they were doing that with him. Um, this is a guy that was thought to have come out of college, be a really great tight end, the next best legendary tight end. He was supposed to be that guy, but he's lining up on the outside on corners. What do you think, Matt? Like, should we be concerned about Kyle Pitts?
I think we should actually. I saw another stat on Reddit. It was something like he got 0% separation in a game or something like that. So yeah, I'm kind of concerned with Kyle Pitts. I don't really think he's going to be like the top tier tight end that everybody expected him to be. And to be honest, I think the Falcons in general are just like very underperforming. Um, I did want to bring up about the running back position. So Bijan, as of Tuesday, October 1st, has a hamstring injury, which limits him in Tuesday's practice. So if Bijan is out, the next running back up would be Tyler Algier, and I think he's also worth a waiver wire pickup if you have room. Because Algier, I was watching him on Sunday. He's looking very good. He was actually getting the ball quite far down the field. So I think Algier, if given an opportunity, would be a good fantasy producer. So if you have room and you want to preemptively get Algier, I would suggest that.
Yeah, I had a stat that Tyler Algier actually carried the ball more times than Bijan in this last game, only on 15 less snaps. You expected Bijan to be this running back one in this room, taking a priority, most of the snaps, probably 80 percent at least. That's what I would think from a guy that is coming out of college like Bijan was, who has the expectations, but they're not doing that with him. So that's a bit of a concern for me as far as, for the rest of the season. Oh, I want to see more from Bijan. I want to see more from this entire Atlanta offense. To be honest, on the other side for New Orleans, Rashid Shaheed is kind of popping off. I really want to just briefly point this out. He had a career high of 11 targets in this game. He finished in last week's game with more routes run, more targets, more yards, more air yards, and rushing attempts than Chris Olave on only one less snap than Olave. This is what I expected to see last week, week 3, when I said that Rashid Shaheed should have been started. This is what I expected, and it's crazy that it's happening now. But it seems like he has a firm role in this offense, and it might just be kind of parallel to Olave.
Any other thoughts on this matchup for Toronto, or should we go to the next one?
We can go ahead and go to the next one.
All right, next up is Jets and the Vikings, and I'll start us off by saying I think the Vikings. You're starting everybody on the offense. You're starting even Sam Darnold potentially. You're starting JJ, of course. You're starting Aaron Jones. Um, Addison. I'm a huge Addison believer, and he shows up. You're starting Addison, and then on the Jets side, I'm not really starting anybody on the Jets side. If I have options outside of Garrett Wilson, I'm probably starting some options outside of Garrett Wilson. I think the Vikings are showing some of the best defense in the league right now, and then I think they're just going to destroy the Jets. They're going to limit them, and you're not going to get much out of fantasy production. The only person I would start is probably Brees Hall. He might have a bounce back game, but you're just banking on his bounce back game.
Yeah, I'm gonna agree with you on everything that you said. I want to point out Aaron Jones is having a very successful fantasy season. A lot of our friends told me that Aaron Jones was washed, and I'm happy to have drafted him in our league where I did. He's definitely the best running back I had. He's making up for Christian McCaffrey not being there, so I'm very happy with his performance. Thus far, he's literally carrying my running back room. As far as the Jets are concerned, I do have some concerns for Brees Hall. Uh, Braylon Allen had 8 carries compared to Brees Hall's 10 last week. Aaron Rodgers had more rushing yards in week 4 than Brees had. He had 26, Brees Hall had 4. And you just can't have that from a running back one. I know they were facing Denver. I know this is a very tough defense, but you can't have that in your fantasy production for a running back one. This is a guy that everybody drafted in the first round. This is a guy you need to score. He had every snap during the 2-minute drill, most of the third down plays, but Allen is looking way better. He actually has the highest Pro Football Focus rushing grade in the entire NFL. What do you think about that, Matt? Should we be concerned about Brees Hall? Should we be trying to sell him?
I didn't really see the stats on Braylon Allen, but just in my gut feeling, I don't think we need to be concerned about Brees Hall. I think when you watch him play, he's pretty solid. He's a good pass catcher, and I think he's gonna have a bounce back. He's gonna get he's the RB1 on that team for a reason. He's not gonna lose his job overnight, so I'm not really concerned at all. And I would buy low on Brees Hall if I had to choose.
I absolutely agree. So we can go ahead and continue on. Uh, go into the Panthers taking on the Bears in Chicago. Tell me about your favorite plays of this week there, Matt.
All right. So I don't like anybody on the Bears. And in terms of the Panthers, I'm gonna go with Chuba Hubbard. I think he's extremely solid right now. He's had a very good 2 weeks. So I'm gonna go with Hubbard. I'm gonna go with Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson is looking like a very nice wide receiver right now. So this would be my two plays out of that game.
Yeah, I will agree with you. I know that Andy Dalton probably shouldn't be started. The Bears have a pretty good defense. So I'm not going to go ahead and start Andy Dalton. I definitely will start Deontay Johnson and Chuba Hubbard, as you said. I think that a potential waiver wire pickup that everybody needs to be considering is Xavier Legette. 38% rostered in fantasy leagues. He had 10 targets last week with a 25% target share, scored 19 fantasy points. It would have been a lot bigger if he didn't have a couple of drops, but I think that with Adam Thielen out, his potential is skyrocketed. As for the Bears, I hate all of their receivers. I saw a stat. Um, DeAndre Swift last week had more targets and receiving yards than DJ Moore, Adunze, Allen, and Cole Kmet. Uh, Actually, he almost had as many targets as Adunze, Allen, and Kmet combined, Matt. It was absolutely abysmal. Uh, and I still think DeAndre Swift is trash, to be honest. I don't like him in any opportunity that he's been given. That being said, um, I think that the receivers are just as trash. Not necessarily like trash as in they can't play, but they're not fantasy viable in my opinion. Uh, and I think that the Bears team just needs to be avoided pretty much at all costs.
Yeah, I agree. There's some teams that you just don't like to watch play, and like for me, one of those teams is the Bears. Like I just don't like watching anything on that offense go down. But the Panthers, maybe just because I'm a Chuba Hubbard fan, Deontay Johnson fan, but I do like watching them on the Panthers, at least when Andy Dalton's on the field.
Yeah, I would absolutely say that Andy Dalton has brought back some hope into the lives of Carolina fans, whereas Bryce Young kind of took the life out of them. Andy Dalton's right there, ready to revitalize them.
All right, our next game up is the Ravens and the Bengals. How about you tell us your thoughts about that?
All right, so this is definitely going to be a tough divisional matchup. Divisional matchups are always very tough, particularly in the AFC North for some reason. I do think that this will potentially be a high scoring game. I think that the Ravens will definitely take it, and it will be on the back of Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going to feast on this defense. I saw a stat of the running backs versus the Bengals so far this year. Every single running back, other than the Washington running backs who kind of split carries, has scored over 15 fantasy points versus the Bengals defense. And Washington had two running backs that each scored over 10. I think that the Ravens run their offense primarily through Lamar and through Derrick Henry. So I love those two guys to start. But Lamar is not getting the ball to his playmakers. Mark Andrews had one target last game. Zay Flowers, as I'm sure you remember, scored 2 freaking points, and we had to hear about it for the entirety of yesterday. He scored 2 points. That it's not somebody that we want to start. Honestly, I'm ready to bench him. To be honest, um, why don't you tell us about your favorite plays, Matt?
Yeah, I think Derrick Henry is probably the best play in this whole game. I think Derrick Henry's showing that he's, still a tank and he's gonna run through everybody. Lamar is a must start, but yeah, Lamar is not getting the ball out to Mark Andrews, Isaiah Likely. I think that's a little to be expected because Likely, like I mentioned before, I don't think he's like a week to week guy. Mark Andrews a little bit more surprising, but I think the most surprising is like Zay Flowers is probably the right wide receiver one on that team, and Lamar is not getting him the ball whatsoever. So I think the only players you're starting are Lamar and Derrick Henry on the Ravens, and then the Bengals. I think you could start pretty much everybody. Joe Burrow's a decent start. Jamar Chase is, decent start, one of the top wide receivers. And then honestly, I think you can start both Zach Moss and Chase Brown. I think Zach Moss is completely solid. I'm a huge Zach Moss fan. And then Chase Brown has he kind of exploded last week, and they're kind of splitting the backfield a little bit, but you can kind of see that it's kind of like the Lions with them. There's enough room for everybody to eat. So I think you could even start Chase Brown if you need to.
Yeah, you know what? I absolutely agree. We talked prior to recording this. You said that Chase Brown leads the entire NFL in yards per carry. I see here that a stat is his rushing success rate is at 65.5%, and his expected points added per rushing attempt is plus 0.25, and that's only with his longest rush being 20 yards. I expect his role to expand. He is not a guy that is rostered in every league for some reason. I saw a bunch of fantasy YouTubers this morning posting that for some reason Chase Brown actually is not rostered in a lot of leagues. This is a guy that needs to be. He is explosive, and I do expect, as you said, him to have a much larger role in this offense. He had the same amount of carries as Zach Moss last week, and he did way more with them. He also scored 2 touchdowns on the ground versus Zach Moss getting one through the air. I expect to see more from Zach Moss and Chase Brown. This is an offense from Cincinnati. I know they're 1-3, but this is a scary offense, Matt.
Yeah, you need to go out and try to get Chase Brown if you can. He could definitely split the backfield and definitely get you a lot of points throughout the weeks.
I absolutely agree. We can go ahead and move into our next matchup. This might be the game of the week, in my opinion.
I think
It's
so too.
it's going to be the Bills taking on the Texans in Houston. What do you think about these plays, Matt?
Yeah, I think this is probably the most exciting matchup of the week by far. In terms of the Bills, you're starting Josh Allen, you're starting James Cook, you're starting Shakir. Texans, I think everybody on the Texans is a start. Nico Collins is like the number one wide receiver right now. Stroud is a start. And who is the Texans running back? Is Mixon still out, Vitrano?
I saw a report that Mixon came back to practice and he's looking good to playing this week. If he does play, I do think that he is a must start. This is a Bills defense that obviously just gave up uh almost 200 yards on the ground to Derrick Henry, gave up a whole lot of yards to Devon Chan, in the previous weeks. So if he is playing, I would absolutely start uh Joe Mixon. But if Cam Akers is in, I'm not starting him. I hate Cam
Oh,
Akers.
yeah. Do not start Cam Akers,
Do
fellas.
not start Cam Akers, please. You can do much better.
Yeah, don't
But
even hold Cam Akers on your bench. Just drop him. I made the mistake of holding him on the bench, and it's just a waste of a spot.
I absolutely agree. Now as far as everybody else on this team, I love starting everybody. James Cook, Josh Allen, CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, Khalil Shakir, Stephon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid. I might even consider starting Dalton Schultz. I do anticipate this is going to be a very good running game for both sides. However, I'm kind of expecting each team to have 35 plus passes, to be honest. I'm hoping that this game is a shootout. I really am. Two of the most high powered offenses in the entire league. I'm literally foaming at the mouth thinking about watching this game. It's going to be such a great game.
Yeah, I agree. It should be really good. Anything else you want to say about this game, Vitrano? I mean, I think we can all agree just pretty much start everybody playing in this game.
CJ Stroud and Nico Collins, please do something. Thank you.
Next game up will be the Colts and the Jaguars. So I'll start us off on this one. For the Jaguars, I'm honestly going to say don't start anybody on the Jaguars. I think Trevor Lawrence needs to figure some things out. I think ETN needs to step up his game a little bit. And then the only person I would consider starting on the Jaguars is Brian Thomas Jr., honestly, the rookie. I think he's playing great and he's getting some good points. And in terms of the Colts, uh, if Richardson is in, I'd probably suggest sitting Pittman. I know he got 10 points before Richardson came out of the last game, but historically, of these past few games, Pittman is not really getting anything done with Richardson. So if Richardson plays, I would consider sitting Pittman if you have the option. And are you starting anybody else on the Colts, Vitrano?
Yeah, obviously I really want to start Anthony Richardson if he is playing, and Joe Flacco if he is playing. In if Richardson isn't, I want to start him because I do think that the Jaguars defense is just that bad. Um, Obviously, like you said, if Flacco is playing, Pittman becomes amazing as an option. I do think, honestly, Josh Downs becomes a very good option as well if Flacco is playing, and I would consider flexing him if that's the case. As far as the running backs are concerned, Jonathan Taylor hurt his ankle, is considered to have a high ankle sprain, but a minor high ankle sprain, whatever, information that tells you. So he's not anticipated to play in this game. So therefore, I don't, I don't anticipate the Colts running the ball very much. You're not going to want to start Trey Sermon versus the Jaguars. It's going to be a waste of time. Uh, but that's pretty much how I feel. Joe Flacco, if he plays, the receivers are going to do great. Anthony Richardson, he might do something, but he might just play, running ball. As far as the Jaguars are concerned, I kind of disagree with you in the Etienne range. I think that Etienne, this will be a good bounce back game from him versus a very mediocre Colts defense. And I say mediocre in the sense of they literally just gave up a crap ton of points over the last couple of weeks. Cordarrelle Patterson, I'm not even going to talk about Najee because Najee is trash. Cordy P had 6 carries for 43 yards on this defense. I and they gave up 55 rushing yards to Justin Fields and 2 touchdowns. This is a crappy defense. I expect everybody on this Jaguars offense to feast. I'm not going to start Trevor Lawrence. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. But I will start Christian Kirk and I will start Brian Thomas Jr. And I'm still waiting for Evan Ingram to come back because I drafted him in so many leagues and he has not played at all, and it's kind of pissing me off.
All right, let's pray for Evan Ingram to come back so Vitrano can win some matchups. And let's go into the Dolphins and the Patriots. Give us your thoughts on that, Vitrano.
Yeah, this is trash. Um, this game sucks. I This is the bathroom break. That's just straight up honest. Devon A-Chain, since Tua got hurt, trash. Tyreek, since Tua got hurt, trash. And you called last week that Tyreek should have been sat. A very bold take. But look, you were absolutely right. In PPR, he got 8 points. That is not worth a start. That is not worth anything. He's currently the 26th best wide receiver in fantasy football in PPR. The Dolphins are trash. They just lost to the Titans. They lost to Mason Rudolph. They're trash. I'm avoiding everybody on this offense. As far as New England's concerned, they're also trash. I might consider starting Ramondre if I don't have any better option, but I hate this game. I don't want to start anybody from this game. This is literally the worst game of the week. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely agree. It's the worst game of the week. If you watch Red Zone, this is the game that Red Zone doesn't even cover at all. Like they're not going to cut to it whatsoever. Like this game is, I think the Dolphins are arguably the worst team in the NFL right now, and they're against arguably the next worst team in the NFL. This game is not going to be fun to watch. Fantasy wise, you're not going to play any of these players. And then Tyreek Hill. So Tyreek Hill makes you kind of wonder, like, what's going on with him? Was he only Tyreek Hill with Tua? Because Tua is a very good, accurate, deep passer, and Tyreek Hill could get that separation because he's so fast and then just take off with the ball downfield. But without that, Tyreek Hill isn't really doing anything. So it kind of makes you wonder if he's going to have a very mediocre season without Tua. So what do you think, Vitrano? Do you think Tyreek Hill needs Tua?
Yes. I think that this entire offense needs Tua. Skylar Thompson definitely not the answer for this offense. It doesn't seem like Tyler Huntley is either. It looks like Tyler Huntley is going to remain the starter against New England. I don't expect this to be a very high scoring game. If it is, I'm going to literally crap my pants because these teams are so bad. Their offenses are so horrible that I'm expecting something like a 10-3 game where one touchdown comes off of some fluke special teams play or something like that. Um, this is the type of game that you play when you torture people. It genuinely is. Like I just I don't even want to look at it anymore.
Yeah, I'd be surprised if the Dolphins get two touchdowns that weren't by Achan, to be honest.
I absolutely agree. So we can go ahead and continue on from that and go into the next game. We're talking about the Browns taking on the Commanders in Washington. Who are your favorite plays from this, Matt?
Let's see. I know the Browns are a little bit of a tougher defense, but honestly, Jaden Daniels is playing absolutely amazing. So I think Jaden Daniels is like absolutely the number one play in this matchup.
Yeah, you know what? Jaden Daniels, he is statistically right now the most I think it was the most accurate quarterback. It's either as a rookie or in NFL history. I know I saw it on Twitter somewhere, but through the first 4 weeks, he is that good. He has been very consistent. He threw his first pick last week on an errant throw. I actually watched that pick and I know what he was going for. He just threw the ball a little late, which is why it was intercepted. But fantasy wise, he's getting it done, especially on the ground. He has 40 yards in pretty much every game this season. He had 39 in week 3, but he had a touchdown. He has 4 rushing touchdowns, Matt. I believe he is currently the fantasy quarterback one. He is currently fantasy quarterback number one. He has a total of 7 touchdowns, 4 of them on the ground, over 200 rushing yards already, only 1 turnover. He is cooking. And I think that this Washington team finally has life. They're going to be efficient on offense. They have Kubiak, sorry, not Kubiak. It's the Arizona, Cliff Kingsbury, former Arizona head coach Cliff Kingsbury, and he is cooking up a storm for them right now. He's so efficient. Um, I love everybody on this offense. I love Terry McLaurin. I'm even myself. I'm starting Austin Eckler this week in my own league, mostly because Tony Pollard is not playing because he's on bye. I'd start Brian Robinson still, Jane Daniels, obviously. Now, what do you think about the Browns, Matt? Not a very good team thus far.
Yeah, I think Jerome Ford played pretty good last season, but this season he hasn't really done anything fantasy wise. The only person I would consider starting on the Browns is Amari Cooper, and I'm starting him in a league just because I have to. I drafted him as one of my wide receiver spots, but he's honestly a gamble. Yeah, it's honestly just a coin toss if he's going to get you points or not. But I'd say the only person that's fantasy viable right now on the Browns is Amari Cooper until proven otherwise.
Yeah, I'm gonna absolutely agree. The one stat that I do remember is Washington has given up the most passing yards and most passing touchdowns to opposing teams since the beginning of last year. This is still not a great defense. If Deshaun Watson is going to have a comeback game, if he is going to produce, it's going to be this week. But that offensive line is battered. They're not very good. Jerome Ford scored 15 points last week. I do expect that he could have some similar, you know, significant role this week. Uh, right before Nick Chubb comes back, then obviously Nick Chubb is going to take it. But like you said, Amari Cooper is the best performer in on this team. He's had at least 8 targets in every week this year. He just needs to convert them, and he will be so good in fantasy. He will be that guy that everybody thinks he is. I'm putting some of the blame on Deshaun Watson for that. I don't think Deshaun Watson has played his best, but I'm not going to blame him entirely because I know that line is kind of trash. And lastly, David Njoku has returned to practice this week. This is another tight end that I drafted in a ton of leagues who got hurt in week 1, and I'm just waiting for him to come back because I feel like when he does, he will be that tight end 1. He will produce for this team, and this offense might get things going a little bit more. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I think Njoku definitely might have a really good rest of this season because he had a really good last season. So we'll see if he can keep it up. I will say the Commanders' defense is statistically like really bad, but they played the Cardinals last week, and you think Kyler Murray could throw a couple more passing touchdowns to Marvin Harrison Jr. and he didn't. So I don't think stats are everything, but yeah, I think if Amari Cooper is going to have any comeback game, it would be against the Commanders. So our next game up is the Raiders versus the Broncos. How about you tell us about this game, Vitrano?
So, as far as the Raiders versus the Broncos is concerned, again, these are not great teams offensively, I will say. The Raiders do have some very shining points on offense. Obviously, Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Trey Tucker even has scored 38 points over the last 2 weeks combined, with Devontae Adams struggling, uh, not playing last week and not producing much in week 3. So this is a very questionable game for me. I do like a lot of the players here for the Raiders. I just don't think I'm going to start them against Denver's defense, who have proven over the last couple of weeks that they are no slouches. If Denver could get some sort of offense going, and that being said, I am absolutely not starting anybody, maybe Cortland Sutton on this offense, but that's probably it. Then Denver would be a powerhouse. They would be so good. Uh, I will say I do think Alexander Madison might be somebody that you want to start sooner rather than later, potentially, as he looks to grab a bigger role from Zamir White, who has been horribly inefficient. But this is going to be a disgusting game. Again, divisional matchup. I don't see this being a very high scoring game. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I was telling you before we started recording about that stat on Patrick Surtain, how he's pretty much limited like very vastly, like every wide receiver he's on. So if Devontae Adams is out, he's either going to be on Jacoby Myers or whoever the other guy's name is, I can't remember. He's going to be on one of them. Yeah, and then so you're basically gambling like who he's going to be on and who's going to get 0 points. So if you play him, you're going to get no points on that. So yeah, I'm not really starting anybody on the Raiders. The only person is, I agree, Alexander Madison. I think you're trying to get him off of waivers if you can. I think Zamir White's kind of showing he's not doing anything, and Alexander Madison would probably slowly get more of a role. And then yeah, on the Broncos, the only person you're really starting is Cortland Sutton, but he'll get you a solid like 10 points, and then from there it's only upside. But then again, you're kind of risking it. So I think all the players in this game are really just like if you have to play them, you kind of gotta risk the low scoring points for maybe some upside.
Yeah, I would say I would like to see a lot more from Brock Bowers. I want to see something similar to what we saw in the first 2 weeks. Even something that we saw in week 3 where he scored 8 points, it still wasn't great compared to the first two, but it was, something compared to how the tight ends have really produced this season, which has been horribly. My last point is that Devonte Adams just pretty much requested a trade to leave the Raiders. And his preferred destination is to go to the Jets to play again with Aaron Rodgers, who he has a significant amount of time played with. Um, if he leaves before the trade deadline, obviously, I do expect Jacoby Myers and Trey Tucker's work to get exponentially higher. I do think that they could potentially be league winners for you this year. But, against Denver, I don't see the Raiders scoring a lot of points. It's going to be a very disgustingly bad game.
Yeah, I agree. You should try to get Trey Tucker's off of waiver wires, but he's not the play this week, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. So we can go ahead and move on into the next game, Why don't you tell us about the Cardinals taking on the 49ers, Matt?
So, as you classically say, Vitrano, the 49ers secondary is trash. So, let's just hope Kyler Murray can throw some touchdowns to Marvin Harrison if we hold him, which, I have Kyler Murray and Marvin Harrison Jr. in 2 leagues. So, I'm hoping that Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be a must start. Kyler Murray, probably going to start him too. James Conner's having a really good season, but he is up against the 49ers rush defense. But honestly, James Conner is probably a start too. And then the 49ers, the 49ers are looking good. Purdy's always looking good in my opinion. Ayuk's the wide receiver one. Debo's can eat. George Kittle can eat. So I like all the starts in this game. This might be a high scoring game.
Yeah, I'm honestly, as a 49ers fan, I'm hoping it's not too high of a scoring game on the Cardinals side, obviously. I'd rather not, you know, have it too close to where we do what we did against the Rams and put Jake Moody in a position to win us the game. I'd rather that not be the case. That being said, Kyler Murray, he hasn't performed for most of the season the way that I think a lot of us have expected to. He got 5.98 points last week against Washington, who have an abysmal defense. Uh, and he just, he hasn't been that guy that we really expected him to be with Marvin Harrison Jr. That being said, Marvin Harrison Jr. has been great, or at least, solid, has a very solid upside for this offense. Trey McBride is obviously very solid. James Conner, obviously very solid. I like pretty much everybody in this game from both sides. I do think Ayuk needs to prove himself. He hasn't been over 10 points, not a singular time is this entire season thus far, which is very disappointing. But everybody else, 49ers should feast. Brock Purdy should, continue to make a case for MVP. Jordan Mason is Jordan Mason. He's been filling the role just fine with Christian McCaffrey not there. Debo, I expect to have a pretty sizable, role in the offense. And George Kittle, even if you're going to start him no matter what. I expect him to also have a pretty big role here. Um, like you said, the 49ers, their secondary is trash. Our secondary is absolutely trash. We never do anything to fix it. I do think our defense is a lot worse than it was last year because I don't see us being as successful, guarding the running game. So that's pretty much all I got to say about that. I'm hoping that it's not too high of a score, but I wouldn't be surprised if every person on both teams kind of feast for your fantasy team.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to happen, in my opinion. Next game up is going to be the Packers and the Rams. So for the Packers, I like pretty much every start on the Packers. I like Jordan Love start. I like a Jaden Reed start. I like a Dontavian Wicks start. Josh Jacobs, I like his start too. He's got to get going at some point, right? And in terms of the Rams, I don't really like anybody on the Rams except Kyron Williams. What are your thoughts on that, Vitrano?
Yeah, so I like what you said about Josh Jacobs because he's primarily who I'm going to focus on in this game. The Rams literally just gave up like 30 fantasy points to DeAndre Swift. That I think that says enough right there. I don't think that the Rams are going to be in this game for long, which might limit the amount of points that your players like Jaden Reed, like Dontavian Wicks are going to perform. Um, but I do think that everybody should be pretty good here. I even think that Tucker Kraft, the tight end for Green Bay, should be fairly good. I have some stats here from him. He had 9 targets last week, caught 6 balls for 53 yards and a touchdown. He has solidified himself as the tight end one here over Luke Musgrave, and it seems like Jordan Love has a pretty decent rapport with him. He's played over 80% of snaps in 3 of the 4 games this season, and it seems like he's pretty good at breaking tackles and getting yards after the catch. I think that he is not rostered in almost any league. He is 11% rostered currently, and now that Jordan Love is back, he might be, a fantasy viable tight end that you might want to insert. Um, as far as the Rams are concerned, yeah, I don't really like anybody here. Maybe Tutu Atwell, who has established himself as the wide receiver one while Puka and Cooper Cup are hurt. I hear a lot of hype going around Jordan Whittington, who had 8 targets last week for 6 receptions and 62 yards, scored 12 fantasy points. But, I'm not too high on him. Same with Colby Parkinson, who has been decent in fantasy for tight ends, pretty average. But Stafford is trash so far. The whole team is beat up. I don't like the team. Kyron Williams is the only person that's doing anything on this team.
Yeah, and what do you think about Puka or Cooper as like buy low targets? We're trying to like buy them while they're out for like getting ready for playoffs and later in the season. What are your thoughts on that?
I do think that Cooper Cup will probably be back after the bye. I know he's not going to play this week versus the Packers. He's already been ruled out, and he has a bye next week. So I'm expecting him to play in week 7. Puka, on the other hand, is probably about a month out from still being back. I think once Cooper Cup returns, we're going to see what we saw week 1 with 21 targets, 14 catches, 110 yards. This might be a guy that people are trying to offload. I think that if you have a really good team already and you're trying to make a push for that fantasy playoff wins, this might be a guy that you want to go after. Everybody that's had him the same way that I have with Christian McCaffrey, it's been kind of frustrating because you don't know when they're going to come back, if they're going to come back, and you need guys that are going to fill that role. So if you have the depth, I would say go for it. I would say there's a lot of fantasy managers out there that are ready to get rid of Cooper Cup for a guy that's ready to play now. So if you can, work a deal, buy him low, I would absolutely do it. No questions asked.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a good thing to consider. I think a lot of people just kind of live in the now in fantasy and they think, oh, he's not producing now, but you got to think, pretty down the line. And if you have a guy that is producing decent now, but he probably won't, or you don't think he'll produce later, that would definitely be a good idea to try to trade for Cooper Cup or even Puka. I think Puka is also a good buy low.
I absolutely agree. Actually, I traded Puka in my dynasty league uh, to Chandler. He was part of the trade that got me AJ Brown and Wandale Robinson. He just, I decided to offload him because he was hurt too often. Something that I decided to do for, I'm just a little scared of his durability. But, if you feel like he's going to produce for you and win you your fantasy league, I do think he'll come back, and I do think he'll come back strong. I'm all for it.
Yeah, he does get hurt a lot, but sometimes you got to gamble, like you got to gamble that he's going to just win you this fantasy season and he's not going to get hurt. But if he doesn't get hurt, he could definitely win you those matchups. All right, so let's get into our next game, which is the Giants and the Seahawks. So, Vitrano, you're saying how the Seahawks were kind of fraudulent, and then the Lions, well, they put up a good sport against the Lions, but the Lions came out on top and gave them their first loss. You want to elaborate on that a bit?
Yeah, I honestly, I mean, looking at who the Seahawks played, it's hard not to say that they were fraudulent because they had a very easy schedule leading up to this. We saw them play Denver in week 1. We saw them take on, who was it last week? It well, the week prior, sorry. It was, give me one sec. It was Miami. Miami without Tua, and they played the Patriots and they went to overtime in that game. This is, they're fraudulent in my opinion. They did show something versus Detroit. I do think that this is a team that probably plays to the level of their opponents, unfortunately. Just based off of what I saw from yesterday and previous weeks. That being said, I completely crapped on Kenneth Walker even yesterday. I would not have started Kenneth Walker if I had him in any league. That's just my honest opinion because of the team that he was going against. And he did prove me wrong. 80 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground, 4 catches for 36 yards. He scored 33 fantasy points. That is a very crazy mark versus this Detroit defense. And I will eat my words on it. That being said, this offense is kind of high powered. Geno Smith looked fairly good yesterday. I do think that DK Metcalf has established himself as a very good receiver. He's the number 7 receiver on the year, and Jackson Smith and Jigba is starting to get those targets. He had 12 of them yesterday for 8 receptions and 51 yards. Even Tyler Lockett had 9 yards. This is a very high-powered offense. I still think that they're fraudulent, but I do think that this is going to be a fantasy team this is going to be a team that performs fantasy-wise. What do you think, Matt?
Yeah, I'm not the biggest Geno fan or Metcalf fan. I had Metcalf last year, but honestly, I'm coming around a little bit. I think Geno is playing a lot better than last year, and it seems like him and Metcalf are really connecting this year. So I have to agree. I think fantasy wise, the Seahawks are a really good option. And then in terms of the Giants, I mean, we already talked about Wan'Dale Robinson a bit. Malik Neighbors, I'm not sure if he's still in concussion protocol or not, but I think we've kind of seen that if he's playing, like you're starting Malik Neighbors like 100%.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think the benefit for Malik Neighbors going into this week, and I'm saying that because I only have him in one league, and it's the league that we're in with all of our friends and everything. I need him to play this week. I really, really do. His benefit is that he got hurt on Thursday night football, so he had a couple of extra days to clear concussion protocol, and there is a lot of hope that he is going to clear said concussion protocol and play this week. I think Wan'Dale Robinson, again, very viable fantasy starter. He has pretty much scored 10 points every week. At minimum, he should be in your flex. But those are the only 2 guys I like in this entire offense, to be honest.
Yeah, I agree. I think we could just go to the next game, which is the Cowboys and the Steelers. So, in my opinion, I think Dak is still a must start. I think CeeDee Lamb is still a must start. Um, I know there's some talk about Rico Dowdle on the waiver wires. Honestly, I'm not super convinced, but if you're looking for the next up running back and you need kind of a running back spot, you can consider him. I still think Kareem Hunt is definitely the number 1 running back you should be shooting for this week. And then in terms of the Steelers, I think Justin Fields has some upside with his rushing touchdown, but I also think it's not guaranteed. Pickens, I think he's a really talented receiver, but he does mediocre to good production every week, so you have to kind of gamble on that. And then in terms of running backs, I think Jalen Warren's still out. I'm not sure, but Najee does not produce fantasy. I keep trying to like believe in him, and then I pick him in certain like things like a FanDuel, and then he does nothing. So Najee, don't start Najee if you can avoid it.
Yeah, this honestly, I feel like this is a very disgusting game. Dallas is 2-2, Pittsburgh's 3-1, but I don't feel like either team is as good as their record says, to be honest. Dallas, they have a very great offense at moments, but a very fraudulent defense currently. I do think that Dak Prescott obviously is a must start. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb is a must start. I know that Rico Dowdle is gaining some traction. He did out carry Ezekiel Elliott last week, 11 carries to 5, and but he just went over the 40-yard mark for the first time this season. He got his first touchdown this season. His role might be expanding, but I want to see a lot more from him. I don't expect him to be a fantasy winner at all because I don't think this is a running team. I don't think that this is a team that's going to rely on their running backs to be successful. I think that this is a team that's going to make Dak throw the ball 40 times a game, to be honest. He threw 51 times versus Baltimore. He only threw 27 times versus New York because they were winning, but I do think that this is going to be like a 35 to 40 pass per game Dak. That being said, definitely love also starting Jake Ferguson. 15 points last week versus Baltimore, 11.9 points this week versus the this past week versus the Giants. Exactly what I needed on my fantasy team. I drafted him in our league, and I was happy to start him. I do think that this Dallas team has a lot of bright fantasy options. As far as Pittsburgh, like you said, Najee is trash. 1.46 yards per carry, 13 attempts for 19 yards versus the Colts. Like, you have to try to be that bad, honestly. Jalen Warren he always flashes his moments, but he is dealing with some injuries. I don't trust him. Pickens could have had a very big day last week. He actually did 7 catches for 113 yards, but he did fumble, and that might be why Indianapolis beat the Steelers last week. I'm still starting Pickens. I'm still starting Freiermuth too, who had a very good day last week and a touchdown. I actually like most of the people in this game. Even Justin Fields, I might consider starting because Dallas's defense is just that bad.
I'm gonna say that this game is a disgusting game on paper. I think we might see kind of the Steelers week 1 type thing where they just can't get a touchdown and they kick a bunch of field goals, and I think the Cowboys might have that same problem against the Steelers defense. I think this could be a very high scoring kicker game. So, Aubrey's a must start, and if you have Chris Boswell, I think you might want to start Chris Boswell. I think this could definitely go that way. And in terms of out of every game, I think this could be the highest scoring kicker game if we had to take a guess on paper.
Yeah, I'm probably gonna agree with that. I'm probably gonna say it's either going to be this game or it's probably gonna be a game like Tampa Bay Atlanta where they both have like divisional you know, where it's a tough divisional matchup. But I do think that you're very much right. I think that this could be a game where nobody scores any touchdowns, and that's kind of sad, especially for a Sunday night game where everybody's watching.
Yeah, that's the Steelers' specialty though. So if you have Chris Boswell, it's time to fire him up. He might be a really field goal heavy game.
And last but not least, we have Monday Night Football. We have the New Orleans Saints taking on the Kansas City Chiefs. What do you think about this game, Matt?
So I think Kamara. I think he's playing in this game. I think you're starting Kamara for sure. I don't know how he played through a broken rib last week. I don't really believe he had actually broken ribs. He probably just had sore ribs. There's no way you played through broken ribs. So I think you're starting Kamara for sure. Um, Olave, I think you got to start him. He's a gamble some weeks, but it's worth the gamble. And Rashid Shaheed is also worth the gamble because if he gets those deep passes, like he's going to get like 1 or 2 touchdowns. So I like the Saints starts against the Chiefs. And the Chiefs, they're 4-0, but they're gonna crumble at some point. They have to lose at some point. And it might as well be to the Saints this week. So I like the Saints start. And then in terms of the Chiefs, do not start Patrick Mahomes, guys. The Mahomes era for fantasy is gone. So don't start Patrick Mahomes if you can avoid it. And then Kareem Hunt, you might want to start him. He's going to be the RB1 this week. And then Xavier Worthy, I think, is definitely a good start.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So I'm disappointed as a Derek Carr owner who has Derek Carr, thankfully, as his quarterback 3, with how he's done the last 2 weeks versus Philadelphia and Atlanta. Granted, considered to be very tough defenses. Uh, I'm not going to start him. Kamara is probably going to get a lot of dump offs in this game. He had 7 catches last week for 42 yards receiving, and that doesn't even include what he did on the ground for 77 yards and a touchdown. Very good. He is literally the security blanket for Derek Carr in this offense. I expect him to remain the same way. Chris Olave and Rashid Shaheed should probably dominate the target share. I expect them both to have a similar line just like they did last week because this will be a very tough matchup. I feel like New Orleans could skate this game by with a win, but I do think that Derek Carr is going to have to throw the ball a lot. I don't think Kamara is going to be very successful on the ground. versus this tough Kansas City defensive front. Um, but I do think that all of these guys are going to be successful. The Camaras, the Olaves, the Rashid Shaheeds. Um, as for Kansas City, I think you're pretty right. Mahomes has thrown a pick in every single game this year. That is not what we expect to see from Patrick Mahomes. We expect to see the guy that threw for 38 touchdowns and 6 interceptions in 2020, threw 50 touchdowns and 12 interceptions in 2018, 41 and 12 in 2022. But it doesn't seem like, you know, in this offense, he's that guy again. I think that everybody who's drafted Mahomes this year has been fairly disappointed with the results, and you should be. Despite being 4-0, he just hasn't been. I don't think he's been the reason why they've won these games. I'm going to be honest. That's just my opinion. Um, he lost his best receiver in Rashee Rice. That being said, I do think that that will lead to Kelsey being a very good option finally for tight ends because I don't see Xavier Worthy taking over the same role as Rashee Rice. I saw a stat that said that Xavier Worthy is more likely to be used as a field stretcher, whereas somebody like Juju Smith Schuster will take over that role because that was the role that he played before Rashee Rice was there and control that kind of middle of the field. Uh, so I think that, there are some scary plays from Kansas City here. I do think Kareem Hunt, like you said, is a must start. I do think Kelsey is a must start. Um, I do think that Xavier Worthy is probably warranting a must start in this game because he should be the wide receiver one, but I am very skeptical of it.
Yeah, I think it's hard to trust a rookie as the wide receiver one so early, but I think he does have some good skill. And then, you have to take a gamble. I think he's a pretty good gamble to get you some points. All right, Vitrano, how about we do our pseudo parlays about which game we think is gonna go over which.
Yeah, I can go ahead and I'll start us off. So for Thursday night, it's going to be a very tough divisional matchup. This is going to be a coin flip. I do think that this is going to be a game that the Falcons take because I do think that they have a better defense than the Buccaneers. I know that the Buccaneers have a very high powered offense, but I do feel like in divisional matchups, I think that a lot of the time the home team kind of has the advantage. So I'm going to lean toward the Falcons here. Vikings are going to go over the Jets. I think that the Panthers have a good shot of knocking off the Bears, so I'm going to go with them. The Ravens over the Bengals. I'm going to go with the Bills to bounce back this week and defeat the Texans. I'm going to continue to go on the Colts and have them knock off the Jaguars to make them the only winless team continuously. The Dolphins and the Patriots, this is disgusting. I hate this game, but I do think that it'll probably be the Patriots, Commanders, and Browns. I feel like this is a game that the Browns probably should win, but I'm going to go with the Commanders. I'm going to go with the Broncos over the Raiders, the 49ers over the Cardinals, the Packers over the Rams, the Seahawks over the Giants. I'm going to take the Cowboys over the Steelers, and I'm going to go ahead and go with the Chiefs over the Saints.
All right, I have a couple different ones. One area I could definitely get better knowledge in is the divisional matchups, but I'm gonna go with the Bucks on that. Uh, I'm going with the Vikings as well. I'm gonna go with the Bears over the Panthers. I'm going with the Ravens over the Bengals. I agree with the Bills and I agree with the Colts. And yeah, the Dolphins and Patriots, man. I guess I got to go with the Patriots. The Dolphins just like so lost without Tua. I'm gonna go with the Commanders, gonna go with the Broncos, I'm gonna go with the 49ers, Packers, Seahawks, and then here I'm gonna go with the Steelers. And then I think the Saints have a very good shot against the Chiefs. I'm gonna go with the Saints over the Chiefs. Chiefs, how about that?
Yeah, I think the one disgusting game, like we said, is the Dolphins and the Patriots. I don't really care who wins. Neither of these teams are good. Neither of
Yeah,
these teams will be anything. And if you had to put a gun to my head to pick one of them, I would just tell you to shoot me.
yeah. I'm not gonna watch it. I don't care who wins. I have no interest in that game at all.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, Matt. So, this has been the Fantasy Reserve, week 5. We're looking forward to seeing football this week. Football already in 2 days. It couldn't come sooner. Uh, Thank you guys for listening. What do you got to say, Matt?
Yep. Thank you, everybody who listens to this podcast. If you have any questions for us, you can email us at thefantasyreserve@protonmail.com. Email us any question, who to start this week versus who not to start this week versus any waiver wire ideas or anything fantasy football related. Send us an email and we will talk about it on the next podcast. All right,
Yeah,
everyone.
you can also contact us on Twitter. You can contact me via Twitter on uh, my personal Twitter, and I will make sure that you also get this into the podcast at Vitrano_YT. Uh, Also, a potential, whatever you want to talk about. Who should we start? Who should we sit? Anything on your mind, you can also contact us there.
All right, everyone. Have a good night and thank you for listening to our podcast.
Peace.